Hello, all. It is the Sunday after the fights, and this one's a little bit later than usual because the main card I had to watch not live. I had to watch that video on demand style to get those actions. And all in all, UFC on ABC 3, UFC Long Island, UFC Ortega versus Rodriguez, whatever title you want to use, was a pretty damn solid card. It delivered the fights that were supposed to deliver, delivered. The fights that I wasn't really looking forward to were perfectly fine. Actually, they were, I think, honestly, like even a tad bit better than I expected. Not that there aren't some skippable fights. I don't think really Dwight Grant versus Dustin Stolfus is required viewing. I think honestly, avoiding Misha Tate versus Lauren Murphy might not be a bad idea, just because a lot of people I think have really fond memories of Misha Tate's MMA career, and this fight doesn't really do anything to reinforce them. But I mean, also doesn't take away from her. It's not like it was a terrible, terrible fight or anything. It's just not required viewing. It's just not something you need to watch to understand the fighter or appreciate the sport. And at the same time, I don't think it really showed anything about Lauren Murphy that makes me think that she's going to punch through to the title. But we'll talk about that fight in more detail. A couple of cleaning notes here. Caitlin Chukagian's fighting Manon Fiorot instead of Andrade versus Fiorot. I'm not really keen on that fight, to be honest. Like a little bit I am. A little bit. But at the same time, it feels like Fiorot should be fighting somewhat fresh blood, because like the big question with her is like there's some questions about like technical depth and how complete her game is, and can she respond to like some decent game planning, decent fight IQ, etc. And Chukagian challenges a lot of that, but at the same time, like I'm kind of desperate for new blood to fight Valentina, and if Chukagian beats any of them, we're just going to get her against Valentina again. I have no interest in that fight. So it is kind of the weird one. So I was way more hyped for like Andrade versus Fiorot than I am for Chukagian and Fiorot, but that's still not a bad fight. And it does make sense, even though I would really like to set Chukagian to the side for the time being, along with a couple other fighters. Like Lauren Murphy actually kind of fits this bill too. I don't have interest in seeing them fight Valentina again. Slide them to the side. Let them be like lower down gatekeepers. I know that's not fair for them, but it is the nature of the division and just how far Valentina has been from the division for quite some time. And the only other thing I'm going to say is that the UFC did give out, I believe, and I could be wrong on this number, but I believe they gave out performance of the night bonuses to each fighter who finished a fight, with the exception of Yair Rodriguez. So that is 5 additional performance of the night bonuses. And that at $50,000 a pop, you're talking about $250,000. And that sounds tremendous. That sounds great. And there are people who really, really, really want the UFC to be given a ton of credit, like Dana White, the UFC, so on, kind of as an anti, they don't take care of the fighters thing. Here's the thing. The company still is making billions of dollars, probably made quite a bit. I don't know how it breaks down, but we are talking about millions of dollars off of this event. $250,000 is not a lot by those standards. $250,000 is a lot for me, but I don't own a house. $250,000 for Dana White, who owns a mansion, a very, very large piece of land with many ridiculous amenities, is not a lot. And of course, yes, I hear you. Dana White deserves to be compensated for making MMA what it is today. I have no objection to that. My objection is the idea that, like, one, that it hasn't been done, and 2, that Dana White is actively actually not really doing what's best for business in a lot of ways with the UFC. That's just me. And of course, the whole we don't hold fighters hostage. They have definitely held Nate Diaz hostage, because here's the thing. even if we ignore the provisions of Nate Diaz's contract and how it's been extended several times, here's the thing. Dana White has said that Nate Diaz fighting Logan Paul in a boxing match makes a lot of sense for Nate Diaz, or Jake Paul, pardon me. Makes a lot of sense for Jake Paul. It would be good. He would like to see it. He would like to see Nate go make that money. All of this ignores the simple fact that Dana is the only person standing in the way of that fight because, well, at the moment, let's not assume that Nate Diaz and the Paul camp would actually get along and make that fight happen quickly. But, I mean, in general, if you want that fight to happen, you don't object to it, you want what's best for Nate, give him his release, and get out of the way. There you go. Let's get on to the card. The main event is actually going to be a little bit of a low point of the breakdown because, of course, at 4:11 of the first round, Yair Rodriguez has got an arm bar. Not a great arm bar, but an arm bar. Like the position he's there on Brian Ortega. Ortega pulls out his arm and sadly dislocates his shoulder. And that's the end of the fight. Medical stoppage, tech sub, TKO injury, whatever you want to call it. Some have even said it's a straight up submission, which I could. I have no problem. Whatever terminology you want to use, go ahead. The problem is that every question I had regarding Yair Rodriguez coming into that fight, and every question I have in regards to Brian Ortega is essentially still there. So it's kind of a non-event. I'm not arguing that Rodriguez shouldn't get the win, shouldn't get the bonus, shouldn't get the W on his record. All these are true. It's just that I was kind of hoping to see this fight paint either of these fighters in a new light. Sort of similar to how Rodriguez versus Holloway and similar to how Ortega versus Chan Sung Jung did actually do that, where they showed off new skills, more well-rounded game, particularly in Ortega's case, like a more reliable game. And we didn't get that. And that's no one's fault. It's the down point of this whole thing. What's next for these two fighters? Obviously, I have no idea for Ortega. He's probably, I believe the prognosis is he's probably looking at surgery on the shoulder to fix it. And this is not the first time he's had shoulder problems, which is concerning and a possibility thing like a Manny Gambirian type situation where you have like a permanently messed up shoulder and that is going to inevitably impact your career going forward. It's kind of troubling. That being said, does Yair Rodriguez get a title shot? He might. He was told if he wins this fight that he would. He did win it. I assume there wasn't a caveat about winning it by something other than how he won it. Should he get a title shot? I don't know. The problem for Yair Rodriguez has been that there's just not a lot to his resume. He's a guy who has a win over Brian Ortega and Chan Sung Jung, but then the drop-off is like Jeremy Stevens and Alex Caceres, Andre Fili, Dan Hooker, Charles Rosa, Leonardo Morales. Is there anything really title contention worthy there? I mean, Chan Sung Jung to a certain degree, has been a stepping stone in the past, but usually a stepping stone that involves a bunch of other ranked fighters. And Rodriguez doesn't have that. And as much as a fight between Rodriguez and Volkanovski, flashback in time there for a second. As much as a Yair versus Volkanovski fight does have more interest than Josh Emmett versus Volkanovski. That's a very Malbatoast white bread fight because what's Emmett going to do? Like, Emmett's one of the few guys who doesn't even have the basic physical advantage of a much longer reach than Volkanovski. He's got a puncher's chance, obviously. He's got power. He's got athleticism, explosivism. And Rodriguez is much more dangerous in multiple directions and more creative. More lethal, you would think. But, like, I don't think Volkanovski really actually has a problem to fear from either of them. I think he beats them both. And Emmett has the stronger sports resume with the additional fact that he's, getting older, and there will be more opportunities for Yair down the road, maybe even ones that he can win or that he would be more competitive in. So I like the door of Emmett fighting for the title and Rodriguez taking on some other cool fight. Second pick, Rodriguez versus Emmett. Well, maybe Volkanovski does something cool at 155 or something. Because 155 is actually a little bit starved of like a really, really intricate title contender. Because there's a lot of people who don't want to see Islam Makhachev get the title shot. There's a lot of people who do. I'm not taking sides on that. But it doesn't seem like that's a can't-miss fight right now. And a lot of the objections basically surround like Makhachev hasn't done enough to get a title shot. So do the super fight. Oliveira Volkanovski. Let Makhachev have a big fight against Beneil Dariush, Michael Chandler, Poirier, Gaethje, whatever you want to do. Even something like against someone like Gamrot or something. To continue to build up his resume, make it undoubtable as much as you can. And then the winner of Volkanovski Oliveira gets that fight. And in the meantime, you don't do an interim belt, please, no. You do a number one contenders title eliminator bout, Emmett Rodriguez. What we'll probably get is some kind of interim title bullshit with Rodriguez. If Volkanovski is actually serious about doing the 155 thing, or Rodriguez just getting a title shot, full stop. In a fight that I'm personally not super excited about, but I mean, if you are, it's your call. I've never been a big believer in Yair Rodriguez. I will freely say this, that I have been I don't want to say hater, because a hater is like just based on like something you would never accept or like a personal thing. With Rodriguez, I watch his fighting style and I just see a lot of physicality, a lot of physical talent, but just so many gaps that have not really been exploited. And I just think Volkanovski would. So like the fight doesn't excite me in a tremendous way. But if it does you, then all the more power to you. So let's move down to the co-main event. Amanda Lemos versus Michelle Waterson. Apparently Waterson won the first round on 2 judges' scorecards. I'm fairly surprised by that. What was the official UFC stats for that round? 16-13 in favor of Waterson. Lemos got the better strikes, obviously. And I don't... Am I there? Okay, there was a takedown. And 53 seconds of control. But was reversed by Lamosh. So, I don't know. That seems like... Okay. There was some insignificant strikes, I guess, here. 22-13. I don't know. I'm not angry about it. But it's not a scorecard I think I would particularly turn in. And then in the second round, Waterson went for a takedown. Ended up on her knees, basically, trying to do a secondary shot. And Lamosh pulled in for the guillotine. As my friend Javier would say, got silly and jumped the gilly. And got the win. So that's pretty nice. And there was also the good sportsmanship moment of Lamosh letting go of the choke after Waterson tapped. I should really be saying Waterson Gomez now that she has the hyphenated name. It always takes a bit for a new name for a fighter to slip in. It is, it happened with Cheyenne Velismus when she stopped being Cheyenne Bays. I think I still call Joanne Calderwood. I have to think about it to call them Wood. But I explained this also with the Nina Ansaroff / Nina Nunez thing. Nina Nunez, now, when she first popped up using Nina Nunez as her name, it actually really confused the living crap out of me because it was a semi-high profile fight. I was like, who's Nina Nunez? And then, go to the Tapology, see the picture, see the record. It's Nina Ansaroff. But now, Nina Nunez. So I do apologize, but there may be some dead naming every so often with a women's female fight. It's not any kind of intentional thing. It's just that is the name I associate with them in the brain. It's going to take a while. Anyways, Michelle Waterson Gomez. Where was I? On her knee, she tapped out, and she immediately also didn't try to play it off as like the Brazilian tap, air quotes, and we had no issues there. So a good moment of sportsmanship. What do I have to say about this for Lamosh? I have the same critiques, thoughts about her, is that I would like to see her be a little bit more higher output. She has all the physical abilities to do things. I would like to see that output come in and sort of diminish my concerns about her long-term cardio and how well she can challenge for a title, because I think she does have the physical upside to be a title challenger. I just think she hasn't necessarily put together the most round-winning style possible. And that's why, like, a really close fight with Angela Hill, a fight here where she lost the first round on 2 out of 3 scorecards, and she comes out with the victory. But she's a good grappler. She's a powerful striker. Her form is actually not bad. Like there's some defense to it. There's some timing to it. There's some accuracy to it. And I would say like a big prospect, but she's a little bit past that point. As for an opponent, her versus Marina Rodriguez would be very, very interesting, I think. Like, I think if I'm just making what fight is most interesting and like kind of fits, that's the fight I would make. But I also wonder if Rodriguez is just not going to wait for a title shot, or like try to wait for a title shot, or take a more higher profile fight to solidify a title shot than taking a fight with Amanda Lamosh. Like if I was Rodriguez's manager, I probably wouldn't accept a fight with Lamosh. Doesn't make any sense, even though, like I said, it's the most interesting. So for plan B, perhaps the winner of Mackenzie Dern versus Zhang Yan, because those are two women that, because they have lost to Rodriguez, don't really have a path to jump her yet. And Lamosh might serve as that jumping point. Or, if Lamosh wins, it's a bigger case for her to get her title shot. I think that's probably the way I would go as a promoter. And then for Michelle Waterson Gomez, I have generally thought that the idea of putting her up against the winner of Tabitha Ricci, Baby Shark, versus Cheyenne Velismus might be the best way to go. The problem with Waterson Gomez, Karate Hottie, is that because she's pretty undersized, she's not someone I'm dying to see title contenders fight, because if they beat her, so much of the question will become, is that just physicality, size, and physical aspects versus technical ones? And that's why it kind of ends up being like contenders on the lower side of the physical spectrum, or just like generally lower in the rankings. I do think her versus Tabitha Ricci would be a really fun fight, though. I actually could see that being pretty interesting, because I think neither of them would necessarily exploit the other one's weaknesses that tend to make not just lose them the fight, but make the fight somewhat uninteresting. Like, for example, Tabitha Ricci versus Polyana Viana was an example of a fight where Ricci is making the right fight IQ stuff, and Viana's not. But Viana's just really big and way more powerful, and therefore the fight becomes frustrating. I don't think we would have that with Ricci versus Watterson. So there you go. That's where I'd like to see it go, but that probably won't be where it'll go. The Leech, Jianling Li versus Muslim Salikov. This fight went fairly like I thought it would go. Essentially, the thing with Salikov is he has flashes of brilliance and creativity that befit his Sanda background, obviously. He's surprisingly strong in the clinch, very physical, very powerful, kind of like all around. But when he's not thinking about being creative, he fights at a pretty standard rhythm, standard pace, that if you can find the gaps in and the openings for, you can land good counters, which the Leech did. You can hurt him, which the Leech did. And obviously, you can finish him, which the Leech did. I've been waiting actually for someone to really take this into perspective, because it hit me when I was studying for this fight with Zaleski versus Salikov, was that Zaleski was winning the fight until he did the typical response to a Sanda fighter, which was try to wrestle them. And I think that resets the timing, and that eliminates a lot of your feel for the counters. And the Leech didn't really do that. He really just came out and said, we're going to show off my improving boxing. He did have a takedown, but still. We're going to show off my improving boxing. I got good combinations. I got good counters. I've got good power. I've got good speed. Despite the fact that, I might have a grappling edge, I actually don't really have the physicality to impose that game on you. So I'm not going to try. And it worked really, really well. Still think the Leech is, has a ceiling. There's a limit to his just raw power that needs to be taken into account. But I would love to see him fight the winner of Vicente Luque versus Jeff Neal. More so Luque than Neal. I've never been a huge believer in Neal, but either of those fights I think would be dynamite. Would be dangerous enough that we would learn more about Leech, and he would. I would favor him over Neal. Although the weird thing with a hypothetical Neal versus a Leech fight is that I'm favoring Luque to beat Neal, and so if Neal beats Luque, what does that look like? What kind of different thoughts am I going to have on Jeff Neal at that point? But they're dangerous enough fights, and they're fitting of his rank, and I think would just be good. Salikov, I'd love to see fight Chaos Williams, actually. Williams is the kind of guy who would, I think, honestly, just straight up demand that he fight at a higher pace, and it might bring out some interesting creativity. It might also just completely cause his game to fall apart, but I think the latter is more likely. And that's why I think that would be an interesting fight. A really crowd-pleasing fight. And moving on further down on this card, we had Matt Schnell with one of the greatest comebacks you are ever going to see. If you've not seen this fight, go check it out. The story is pretty simple. Matt Schnell early on was having some problems striking at range with Mudargi. Mudargi was lighting him up, had him really, 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 really hurt in the second round, and he just refused to accept that. He just came back. Mudargi was letting his guard down a little bit as he was trying to play for elbows. I'm not sure what to call them. They're not really clinch, but almost clinch break elbows without the long clinch exchanges, which he was landing beautifully, and they were hurting Schnell, and they were exploiting the defensive deficiencies. There we go. That's a better word. That Matt Schnell does have, and was hurting him, but Matt Schnell was just recovering and somehow staying clear-headed enough to find the gaps, hurt Mudargi, take Mudargi down, lock on the triangle, got swept, but still managed to finish the triangle. Chef's kiss. Beautiful, beautiful fight. Great comeback by Matt Schnell. Doesn't necessarily alleviate my long-standing concerns that he is kind of a less physically imposing flyweight equivalent of Eddie Alvarez, but it does mean I'm always excited to see him fight, and it doesn't really matter whom. And for Mudargi, it's a setback because he lost, obviously, but I think he showed a lot of good things in the fight, showed a lot of good striking technique. He's pretty well put together. It was a kind of lapse of judgment, over-focusing on going for the finish. I do wonder about his fight IQ a little bit. There was some willingness to grapple with Schnell that I don't really like. His pre-fight interviews, he was talking about how top position would be key to beating Schnell. And it's not that top position's a bad idea against Matt Schnell or anything. He's not an incredibly venomous grappler from bottom, but one, he did finish him here from bottom. Oh, sorry, my phone is going off. My dad is in the hospital, so I do kind of have to have that as an open line of communication, although that was not from him. But anyways, it's muted now. So there are some questions about the fight IQ and some of the game planning that Mudargi puts into fights, but it does have to be said that he is immensely physically talented, and he does seem to be adding new wrinkles and improvements every time out. And I really do think he's someone to keep an eye on. I don't know if I'd go as far as saying like future champion or anything like that. I think that probably is a little bit of an overstatement, but it's definitely very good. Very promising. For next opponents, I would love to see Matt Schnell fight Manel Kopp. I think that's a high-level sort of reward fight. It's a fight that I think he can win. I made no bones about it that Kopp, I think, is a little overhyped from Ryzen. I think it's been shown. I think it's legitimately been shown in a couple fights. So I think Schnell would be like the kind of tough, interesting fight for Kopp, which would, I think, get Kopp back on track if he were to beat him. And of course, it would be a big boon for Schnell. And for Mudargi, I actually really like the idea of him fighting Ode Osborne. I can't really say why, other than they're like sort of both guys who are trying to develop like somewhat similar styles, sort of slick outside strikers with the build definitely to make that work. So both of them would kind of like challenge each other a little bit in that regard. And I'd like it. I think it would be a good fight. Okay, judging rant. I think the judging in the Shane Burgos Charles Jourdain fight is wrong on every level. The reason I say this is that let's look the two cards that were for Burgos. I have less of a problem with. Ironically, even though I think that Burgos won this fight. I scored this 10-9 first round for Burgos. I had a 10-9 or a 10-9 Jourdain first round, 10-8 second round for Burgos is fine, although I did put it 10-9. I actually don't have a problem. I thought he didn't do enough with the back mount to really get it. But I understand it. He nullified anything Jourdain was doing for an entire round. If you want to score that at 10-8, I don't have a problem. But then it's a 10-8 third round, and no one gave the 10-8 third round to Jourdain. No one did. Not even the judge who gave the middle round to Burgos, 10-8 and 10-9 the first and the third round for Jourdain. I don't understand it. He got a 10-8 round for controlling back control and doing relatively little, but Jourdain gets no 10-8 for landing. And this is the UFC's official stats here for a moment. Get ready for this, because it's a big number. 84 significant strikes in the third round. That's a fight's worth of strikes in 5 minutes. He landed 115 total strikes. For comparison purposes here, Shane Burgos over 15 minutes landed 67 total strikes. Jourdain lands 115 in the third round and can't get a 10-8. I don't understand. I understand, I guess. I think it comes down to like the definition of a 10-8 round does need to change. But here's the thing. I've said this before in my scoring video. If you haven't checked that out, it's like episode 15 of the podcast, I think. But in short, and I was debating this with someone on Twitter as well, we tend to blame the 10-point must system, the structure of the scoring, the criteria of the scoring. And the truth here is, again, the judges have to make quality decisions. And I'm not saying a judge won't mess up from time to time, get a scorecard I don't agree with, get a scorecard the fans don't agree with, and that there wouldn't be any logic behind it. But at this point, we have had a judge, Jeff Mullen specifically, who gave an interview where he was explaining his criteria for judging fights. I believe this was on Sherdog. It was years and years and years ago. I wish I had a link to put in the description. I'll try and look for it, but I make no promises. But it reminded me that, like, when he was talking about it, he ignored things like leg kicks, for example. That was the big joke. But the thing that came to me was that Jeff Mullen had a Jeff Mullen criteria. Every fight was judged by that criteria. It had nothing to do with what the athletic commission mandated as the criteria. And he was never punished for this. He was a top-end judge for over a decade. He did UFC main events and title fights. And then you have someone like Chris Lee, a current judge, who has on social media tried to defend his actions and what he thought he saw in the fight. I actually appreciate it. I appreciate that. The problem is that his defenses from fight to fight to fight have not shown any consistent idea. I like, that's the thing, is Chris Lee is, of the current judges, the one who has spoken the most about his judging, and I do not understand what his criteria is. I don't get it. And I can't imagine that the fighters do either. But it should be clear. And that's the problem, is that a judge like that should be held to account. A judge who gets a bad scorecard should have to explain the score, explain why, with consequences on the line. I don't mean for like a first-time offense, but like long time, over a time, there should be a performance analysis review of the judges. And as someone who's done a little bit, tiny little bit of local MMA judging, I can say I would probably appreciate that, because it actually would reinforce my thoughts and help me be better. And Chris Lee is kind of doing that himself. But I don't think Chris Lee is actually listening to any criticism. Otherwise, there would be change. And as long as that's the case, you're not going to get it right. As for the fight itself, I more or less described the second round and the third round already. My thoughts on the first round are Jourdain landed more. Official stats again, 24-12 in significant strikes, 39-12 overall. Yes, Burgos had a takedown. Yes, Burgos had a minute and a half of top control time. I don't care. That does not mitigate the damage Jourdain did on the feet and the more effective striking that Jourdain had, because the grappling did not lead to any damage or any real fight-ending scenarios. So that's a 10-9 round for Jourdain. And I picked Burgos. This is a quote-unquote win for my predictions, and I'm angry about it. That's how bad this decision was, in my opinion. I know there are some people saying that like 1 and 3 or 1 and 2 for Burgos is legit. I don't think it is. But like I don't know. I think I feel like people should be more mad at this. I think there are other things that are declared robberies a lot that are way less robberies than this. My matchmaking for these two afterwards is kind of weird because so Burgos I have going against, I think, the higher rated Hakeem Dawodu, because I think that would be an interesting fight, because I think Dawodu can do a lot of the things Jourdain did in a much more technical way, but doesn't necessarily have the same dog in the fight mentality that Jourdain does. And I want to see Jourdain fight David Onama, even though that's a way lower end fight. But I think David Onama is like the real peach of a prospect that I'm interested in really seeing. And it's like one of those things that I think it'll age really well if Jourdain beats him, or if Jourdain gives him a hard fight, or if Jourdain loses to him, even sort of like the Josh Kulabau fight. And that way I'm giving Jourdain the bigger reward despite going further down the list in terms of rankings. Lauren Murphy beat Misha Tate. I don't really have a ton more to say about it. I didn't think going down to 125 is really the answer for Tate. I just don't think that. I think the game is somewhat passed her by. And I do kind of also wonder why she came back to a sport that, for the amount of damage you take, doesn't pay that well. And it seemed like she had been happy to walk away from. So that always plays in the back of my mind of like, why are you back? It's not that I'm unhappy to see you, but I inherently don't really trust the motivations going into this. That they're good motivations to have. Lauren Murphy, I would like to see fight the winner of Lexa Grasso versus Arujo, and I really don't have much for Tate because in a perfect world, honestly, I'd have her retire again, but I don't know. Does she need the money? Does she absolutely just burn for competition? We'll see. We'll see. She was talking about wanting to fight Valentina Shevchenko after this fight. If she won, that's off the table at least. I didn't want to see that. Further down, I think we have the Ricky Simone fight next. Am I right on that? No. Punahele Soriano versus Dolce Jimbula. Right. This was a fun fight. Jimbula is kind of in a weird spot where like he's lost 3 fights in a row. He definitely should have won the Brundage fight. That's not a decision critique, obviously, because he got subbed. But it was like one of those fights where like everything was going right, and then you lost, and it left me feeling way better about Jimbula than Brundage. This fight, to a degree, is kind of similar because I mean he did suffer what looked like a notable rib injury by the end of the first round. And in the second round, he was really, really, really worried about getting hit in the body. And as a result, I think it just kind of shut everything down on him. And Soriano was able to get it done, to go out there and knock him out with the overhand left there, 28 seconds in. Compromise. All of this I've said has been like really nice to Dolce Jimbula, but I actually did think Soriano was starting to win the fight, like that it was really turning his way. I just think that I think that Jimbula has a lot of the right ideas. Like he's doing a lot of the things I want to see develop from someone of his physicality, of his obvious power, of his physical proportions. These all make a lot of sense. But at the same time, I still think that there are just gigantic holes there. And it's kind of one of those situations where, like, after 3 losses in a row, I wouldn't mind if they cut him to see if he can go to the regional scene, or even down to like a PFL or something, or Bellator. Get some probably more winnable fights. Work on those skills and gain confidence. Because my fear is that historically when we've seen a fighter develop new skills and put together a new style and a transformative process and still lose, but they just go away from it. So I kind of want to see him win, but I don't know if there's a lot of safe fights to give him in the UFC that will produce those wins. He's got great power. He's got good form. He's actually seems to have pretty good cardio for a guy who's as bricked up as him, but he is losing to guys who just have a broader, more comfortable skill set. And it's a weird place. For Soriano, I would love to see him fight the Iron Turtle, Jung Park, because I think it would be a really good fight. Ricky Simone versus Jack Shore, undefeated Jack Shore, not undefeated anymore. The O must go, losing by submission here, arm triangle to Ricky Simone. Essentially, again, I hate to tip my cap here, but like I admit when I'm horrendously wrong, and we're coming up to a fight where I'm horrendously wrong. Don't worry, do not worry. There's gonna be a lot of self-flagellation when we get to Algeo versus Burns. It went largely like I thought it would. I just thought that Simone would be able to find his way into the pocket, into the takedowns, into the counters, and make sure. I didn't really think he would make sure come forward, but he did. Also on that, which opened up the counters even more, that he would just be able to get it done. And a lot of people were like, he's going to get stuck outside, exchanging jabs like he did against Rob Font, and have no answer for it. I'm like, one, I don't think Jack Shore in that specific area is as good as Rob Font. I think Rob Font is one of the best outside jabbers in the division. But two, I think it overlooked that Simone has been making some more changes to vary up his entries and just kind of get around a jab a lot more, and that there's just a physical discrepancy between the two. That Simone can just kind of hoss him, kind of just out horsepower him, like Valiev did at various points, but do it with more energy. And he did. It went great. Simone is in a weird place where like even this fight was on the undercard for some reason. Called out Sugar Shane O'Malley afterwards. He's not going to get that fight. There was a debate. I saw some people on Twitter saying like, when the UFC redoes their rankings, Simone's going to be in front of him. Like, yeah, but it's still not a high enough profile fight for O'Malley to want it. And it's not a high enough profile fight for the UFC to push for it. And it's a dangerous fight for O'Malley that if I were his manager, I would have no interest taking. And it's unfortunate because I think I've made it pretty clear here. Not a big fan of O'Malley. It's less to do with like even him. It's just more to do with the fans of O'Malley, especially after the Pedro Munoz fight. I thought that was I thought that was disgraceful. The level of hate Pedro Munoz was getting, but that's just me. For what I would actually expect / hope / to do, I don't really know because like a lot of the guys ahead of him, like a lot of the rankings that you would like to see him pick up, are guys he's already fought. They're guys like Davalishvili. They're guys like Rob Font. And I don't know. I don't know who wants Simone is kind of the problem. And I don't know who the UFC will try to force to take Simone. So it's weird. I'd like to have a fight in mind, but I really don't. And for Jack Shore, I actually really like the idea of putting him up against Sergey Morozov because Morozov is kind of a similar guy. He's a guy that Shore is going to have a outside game advantage on, a height advantage on, the ability to try to stick the jab in his face, but is a guy who has some complicated entries, a pretty good wrestling game, pretty good power game in the pocket, and can kind of give Shore a little bit of a do-over a little bit to kind of show what he can do in this kind of matchup. Kind of get back on track, but it stays dangerous, rank appropriate, and can be hyped up a little bit. So that was my thought. All right, self-flagellation time. I picked Herbert Burns to beat Bill Algeo. Quickly in my defense, it was kind of for what happened right off the bat when Burns got that triangle choke and had Algeo in trouble and Algeo escaped. And then the thing that I kind of forgot is that when things start going badly for Burns, he doesn't really seem to have a gear to go to. And I understand that he injured his knee. I want to make that clear from the start here. But this had a lot of the feel of the Daniel Pineda fight of once things started going bad, Burns sort of gave up. And I get it. I get it. You're on one leg, so on. But here's the thing. We saw Jessica Penne with a seriously messed up leg. We'll talk about that fight later. We've seen a lot of other fighters try to fight on with that. Heck, I'm going to credit Sean O'Malley here for a moment. Fighting on one leg against Andre Sukumta. That was a great example. But with Burns, it's really slow to get up after the first round, really slow to get up and getting called. And I wish him the best on his recovery, but this is 2 fights in a row where I've been left with the same question. I don't question Burns' skills. His brother and others have said repetitively, he's an incredibly slick BJJ player, and he's shown it to us. And his stand-up's not bad either. But is there just a raw will to gut it out, get through the pain, get through the hardship, and fight through the fight? I don't know if it's there. And it feels harsh. It feels harsh because his knee is seriously messed up. So I don't want to say that kind of thing. I've had knee problems myself. It is not pleasant. But the question does have to be asked, I think. I have no idea what Burns will do next because obviously he's going to be on the shelf for a while. For Algeo, I would just go back to the Billy Quarantillo fight. And if they don't, I'm actually going to be kind of angry because I really, really want Billy Q versus Bill Algeo. Battle of the Bills. Battle of 2 dudes who are king of scrap weight island. And it's a fight that it's dangling there. I've been calling for a long time and make it happen. I don't care. I don't care what has to be done. Dustin Jacoby knocked out what is his name? Daun Jung. There we go. Good performance by Jacoby. There is some questions about the stoppage being early. I thought the stoppage was quite fine. I think the only reason that we really question the stoppage is because Jacoby, after he hit him and put him down, did not follow up. Like, he walked away. He did kind of the pimp walk off, although it was more arms raised, like happy walk, as opposed to the I'm too cool for school walk. But he was nice to him in a nutshell, and as a result, there was some controversy on the matter when it came to the stoppage. It was thought to be too early. And I don't think it was. I think it was a good stoppage, and it just made it look that way because he had a lot of time to recover. Like, he fell dead fish, arms flailing out above the head. I think the referee made a solid call. And the fight kind of went again like one would think it would. Justin Jacoby is not a pinnacle elite level striker. Don't let the glory kickboxing labels fool you on that. But he is, for MMA, very, very good. He throws with power, he throws with accuracy, and he has good timing. And he showed it here against Daun Jung, who I'm still trying to wrap my head around what he is. What he can be is a very, very, very good fighter. But I'm not sure where on the spectrum of green newbie to fully formed elite fighter he's actually at. And if he's going to take steps further down the road. Because I said in the breakdown that I thought his wins over William Knight and his draw with Sam Alvey really, I thought, showed a lack of preparation / fight IQ for both of those fights. And I thought he would give Jacoby the fight that Jacoby needs. And Jacoby got it. Knocked him out. For next opponents, I want Jacoby versus Johnny Walker. Now, someone will say Johnny Walker's on a bunch of losses, and that doesn't make any sense. I think it does. I think that Johnny Walker still has a lot of cachet that is absent from a lot of the other options on the table. And it would be a winnable fight that he could go out there, kick some ass, do his thing, and deliver, while at the same time being tested a little bit, because Walker does have like just a raw physicality that could be there, but I think it'd be a winnable fight with a lot of upside payoff, because he's taken a lot of difficult fights and hasn't really gotten quite his due. And for Jung, I would like to see him fight the winner of Negumereanu versus Porteria, just because if it's Negumereanu, and spoiler, I think it will be, it would be interesting to see what he can do against somebody who's not going to just let him pick and choose his fight. Honestly. Someone who, like, because Sam Alvey, not a guy who's ever going to really force you to do anything. William Knight has a lot of intros to let you control the fight. A couple of his other fighters also have had sort of the same thing. The Kennedy Njoku fight is a good example of that as well. Mike Rodriguez is going to consent to essentially any kind of striking fight that you want. Whereas, like, someone like Negumereanu is going to try to make you either back away from him and show a range striking game, or you're going to have to wrestle with him. And I want to see how that dynamic plays out for Daun Jung. Dwight Grant probably getting cut after losing a decision to Dustin Stolfus. Not much to say here. Grant came out and looked pretty okay in the first round. Got the edge in I thought, the cleaner strikes, the harder strikes, and more strikes. He edged out on volume. Did a good job. But then Stolfus started to just bring the wrestling game to him, and Grant didn't seem to have an answer. Couldn't seem to stop the takedown. Couldn't really get back up. What was the takedown numbers here for this fight? Stolfus got 2 takedowns. I think they lasted most of the round. Let's see here. Yeah, one takedown in the second round for 2 minutes top control, and one takedown of the third round for 2 minutes top control. And just the threat of the takedown, I think, also more or less shut down Dwight Grant's striking game. For comparison purposes, he landed 31 total strikes in the second and the third round. It was 31 strikes in the second round on its own for Stolfus. Even if admittedly Stolfus' strikes are not necessarily all that impactful, necessarily the best, that kind of volume discrepancy combined with the fact that you're getting taken down is not going to win you a fight. And for Grant, I said cut. Let me look at his record real quick. That is 3 straight losses. A win over Stefan Sekulic. He lost to Daniel Rodriguez. And before that, he had a decent run beating Alan Joban and Carlo Pedersoli, but no back-to-back wins since 2019. And he is now 3-5 in the promotion. He seemed like he was making some improvements last fight, where he was picking up the pace and everything. And I honestly thought that, again, a little self-flagellation here, that the move to middleweight might actually be a good idea. That his picked up pace, his aggression, not having to cut the weight, this is all going to make him feel more comfortable, being higher output. What I didn't really realize is that apparently he doesn't really have great defensive wrestling. And yeah, I don't know. He's on the wrong side of 35 and 3-5 in the UFC, and not necessarily the biggest pleaser of the crowds, although he does win by knockout a fair bit. So we'll see. Stolfus himself got a 3-fight losing streak, got to come back. He was 0-3, so I was honestly surprised he got this fight. For Stolfus, I mean, the win keeps him around, but run back my critiques in the prediction video, essentially. I think that the athleticism level is too low. I think his striking doesn't come in combination enough. I think he doesn't throw in volume enough. And while he does have a actually pretty good top game, doesn't necessarily have a great wrestling game, doesn't necessarily have a lot of eagerness to finish on the ground. There's a lot of problems here. And he looked big in this fight, but he's not that big at middleweight. That's the other big question. I have no idea who he fights next. I have no idea. I will throw the name Joe Holmes out there just because Joe Holmes is probably, after he fought Alan Amidovsky, he was pretty much that was pretty much a battle of the two worst middleweights. We're kind of due for that again. We're like Stolfus and Holmes, even though they both got wins, kind of are over guys who are probably going to be cut and are probably still the bottom guys in the division. Let it happen. It's a winnable fight for Stolfus. It's a fight which Holmes will get the kind of fight that best presents an ability to win, which is a grappling one. So let that happen, and I'm not excited for it, but I mean, if they're going to be on the roster, might as well. And then the opener was Emily Ducote versus Jessica Penne. I thought this was a good fight. I was a little bit frustrated with Penne's. So I picked Penne to win this fight under the ability that, like, I don't think Ducote is necessarily has a good clinch game and doesn't necessarily have a game that avoids the clinch if you're willing to just chase it with a hard-nosed determination where you're willing to walk through a little bit of fire to get there. And when Penne did get the clinch, did do her thing, I actually thought that was what was happening. Like when the clinch would happen, Ducote had some trouble breaking it. She did get away relatively quickly, but there was some trouble with it, and Penne was much better in the clinch. But those moments were few and far between, leaving Penne fighting a kind of mid-range kickboxing game for the most part, getting her legs chopped up, and Ducote is actually very, very good at that. She throws with good, with bad intentions, with good form, in combination, and with enough variety that you're kept guessing. Mixes in some hard, heavy low kicks. Apparently set a record for most landed in a UFC strawweight fight. So this was a fantastic debut for her. She moves on to bigger things. Even if I thought Penne fought a little bit suboptimally, she did get the job done. Penne won the second round on, I think, 2 judges' scorecards. Let me confirm that here. 2, yes. David Torelli was the only one that gave Ducote all 3 rounds. Some people had more of a problem with that than I did. I think that is a bad scorecard. I think that the superficial damage of cutting Ducote open really should not have warranted the round win when you consider that the difference in strikes landed and the fact that Ducote was landing better strikes, and I don't think anyone really is going to deny that part, was 37-26. I don't think that that's really at all a possibility to really justify that score. But she drew blood. That will win rounds because everyone is obsessed with damage. And what the definition of damage is can include simply doing some cuts and some superficial damage and getting the job done, a la the BJ Penn versus GSP 1 argument that Penn won the fight because GSP's face was messed up. Next up, I would not mind seeing Ducote fight the winner of Yair Rodriguez and Sam Hughes. I think Yair Rodriguez presents a interesting pocket battle for her. Someone who's not going to instantly lose the power game in the pocket, and herself has a good work rate and a rather unpredictable game. I mean, it's a little bit more predictable. Like, I think that's a winnable fight for Ducote, but like more of a like, are you up to this level if someone is more equipped to play your key game as opposed to Pena, who doesn't have very good shot takedowns and was kind of left shooting pretty much constantly against Ducote and just taking punishment. So, that would be an interesting step up. And in the case of Hughes, someone who's maybe a little bit more persistent on chasing the clinch and trying to utilize that as a weapon. So actually, I really like the winner. Either of those is an option for her. And for Pena, I don't know. It's kind of in a weird place where, like, I don't necessarily see her as a particularly large test of people to a certain degree, because her 39 years old, and I think this was the first fight where actually I think it started showing the age, that there was a slowness to her, an easy to pick offness to her, which has always kind of been there, but maybe Father Time has kind of caught up here, and I don't really know what to do. Maybe you go with another debuting fighter. I guess you lose to a debuting fighter. It's hard to justify someone who has wins in the UFC at that point. So do something with that. That is the end of the recap. We got UFC, KSW, and Bellator next week, so there should be a relatively long prediction video because I'll touch on some of the action on Bellator. I don't know about KSW. There are some fighters I'm kind of interested on there, but I'm not really super familiar with, but we'll try and get that in as well. And if you have not checked out the Discord, I recommend you do. It's a great place for fight nerd stuff. We got the MMA sim, we got the slam ball sim, and we've got just generally a lot of MMA content and pro wrestling content, which you can enjoy. And then obviously follow me on Twitter. And that is about it. The one thing I do is that if there isn't a tremendous negative reaction to it, I might do a CFL Hamilton Tiger Cats podcast episode at some point when we have an off week from fights to talk about my other like big obsession in the sports world. So there you go. Anyways, have a good one. And the UFC is actually doing a really good job putting out good fight cards lately. So there's not a ton from the matchmaking standpoint to complain about, although Simone Shore, I thought, should have been higher on this card.